Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC on Fox 9 and Johnson versus Benavidez 2. And I have to say, this card's been hit really hard by injuries, and it ruined a lot of great matchups. The original main event was supposed to be Pettis versus Thompson. I thought that was a great fight to put on free TV, and that got replaced by Johnson versus Benavidez too. Taking that fight from the last Tough 18 finale card, I thought it kind of ruined that card. And then beyond that, Condit and Brown, that fight got scrapped just a few days ago. And also a prelim fight I was really looking forward to, Scott Jorgensen versus John Dodson. I thought that was a great matchup, and Dodson pulled out and he's replaced, but still some really big, important fights on this card. So let's run through it and I'll give you my predictions and thoughts. So first up on the preliminary card, the online prelims, at flyweight, Darren Uye the Bone Crusher, versus Alptekin Oskalic. Probably butcher that name, but I'm going to take Uye. I don't know anything about the other guy, but he seems like a real strong grappler. Has 2 wins over Kid Yamamoto and finished Phil Harris. And in his last fight, got finished pretty brutally by Joseph Benavidez. But unless Oskalic really surprises us, I think it's going to be a safe bet to take Uye, experienced guy and really strong grappler. So I'm going to take Uye, and I'll just say it by sub because I'd like to see that. I've enjoyed his 2 wins in the UFC so far. Next up, onto the Fox Sports 1 prelims at lightweight, Sam Hands of Stone Stout taking on Cody McKenzie. My brain's telling me to pick Stout, but Stout, I think he hasn't been impressive for a long time, and it really showed in his last fight against James Krause. Got choked out. I just think he's been on a steady decline for several years now. I think his last real big win was over Yves Edwards when he knocked him out, and that was like 2.5 years ago. And McKenzie, he's put in some solid performances. He got ran through by Mendes, but he's beaten. I can't remember who did he beat in his last few fights. I know he beat Leonard Garcia. I know he choked out Marcus Levesser. Oh yeah, so not that impressive. Only 3-3 in the UFC. But I don't know. I just kind of, I can't really justify picking McKenzie, but he's a real funky grappler. Goes at a pretty high pace. I think Stout, should have a big advantage standing up, but I feel like Stout might get out grappled here. Again, Stout's probably the safe bet, but I'm going to take McKenzie. I just think Stout, he's on a decline. I don't think he's looked good for a long time. So I'm taking McKenzie to win by a boring decision. Next up, lightweight, Abel Trujillo versus Roger Bowling. This fight, I think this is the rematch. The first one took place back in September, and I think it was a no contest because Trujillo landed a knee that was deemed illegal by the ref. It was controversial, but Bowling was starting to pull away in that fight a bit. His striking started to come together a bit more in the later rounds, and Trujillo, still looked never really hurt in that fight. Always pressing the action, firing back. But I think Bowling, kind of was starting to pull away, landed a few uppercuts as I remember. I think he got the takedown a few times. But Trujillo, I think, a guy who was a bit overrated because he took on such an overmatched guy in Marcus Levesser in his first fight and dominated him. And we still really haven't seen much of his game. Got badly out wrestled by Nurmagomedov, and then his last fight, he wasn't looking too great against Bowling. He did do more damage to Bowling, I believe, in that fight though than Bowling did to him. But I think Bowling's a little nastier, a little more tenacious. I'm gonna take Roger Bowling to win by decision. Wouldn't surprise me though if Trujillo won the fight or even finished him. I'm gonna take Bowling. Next up at flyweight, Scott Jorgensen versus Zach Makovsky. This was supposed to be Jorgensen versus John Dodson, which I thought was just a great matchup. I thought that was going to be really exciting. I don't know anything about Makovsky. I think he has some hype behind him, but I don't know much about him or really anything. But I'm just going to go with Scott Young Guns Jorgensen, a guy who runs through all of the low-level, bottom-of-the-barrel guys in the UFC and falls short against the elite guys. And every time he loses to an elite guy, they throw him to these, the guys at the bottom of the rungs in the UFC. But I'm going to take Jorgensen. I think he will get a finish here. And to explain what I just said, after he lost to Eddie Wineland, they threw him against John Albert. Is just a tough veteran, still pretty green. Jorgensen finished him. I remember when Jorgensen fought Ken Stone. I believe that was his first fight in the UFC, coming off of the loss to Cruz. So, they throw him in against kind of the bottom level guys after he falls against the top guys, just like he did in his last fight, coming off of his loss to Faber. But I am picking him here to beat Makovsky, who I don't know much about, but I think Jorgensen will get it done. I think he'll finish him either submission or knockout by ground and pound. Next up, a lightweight, Bobby Green versus Pat Healy. Bobby Green taking this on short notice. This was supposed to be... Who was Pat Healy supposed to fight? Jamie Varner. But Bobby Green coming off of that real controversial win over James Krause. But Pat Healy, I was super impressed with his win over Jim Miller a few fights ago, choking him unconscious. And his last fight against Nurmagomedov, he got, pretty thoroughly beaten, but he was still in there, still fighting back. Not totally dominated, but Bobby Green had a real good win against Volkman. Showed a lot of heart in there. Pat Healy, though, I think he's just a little bit higher up, skill level and heart wise. I don't know. Bobby Green showed some pretty good boxing in his last fight against Krause, though. I just gotta go with Healy. I just think he's gonna be tougher. I think he's gonna be able to get him down and work that real relentless smothering top game with ground and pound and taking the back, stuff like that. I think Pat Healy's going to grind out a decision here. I could see Green being better than him on the feet, but I'm going to go with Pat Healy by decision. Next up, lightweight Edson Barboza versus Danny Last Call Castillo. I'm a big fan of Castillo. Doesn't get too much respect, I think, or attention from the fans. Never really finished his fights. Most of his wins have gone to decision. But the guy's a lot like Chael Sonnen, a really strong wrestler and basically only uses that. But he's been able to take almost everyone down and just win the fight that way with real good cardio, staying a real good pace, and the guys have trouble stuffing the takedown. But in his last fight, didn't seem as dominant as he had in the past against Tim Means. Tim Means seemed to give him a bit of trouble on the feet, and Castillo looked a bit slower in that fight. I'm not sure if that's a sign of things to come. If that's the case, I could see Barboza staying away and lining him up on the feet. But Edson Barboza has been taken down before. If you remember back to the Terry Edom fight, Terry Edom was able to take this guy down a few times, and Castillo, he's definitely a great wrestler for MMA, and I do think he's going to be able to push a high pace and get Barboza down. Barboza really hasn't been challenged with strong wrestlers, and I definitely think Castillo's capable of winning the fight that way. So I'm going to go with Castillo by decision. Barboza could definitely, if he can stop that takedown, he'll definitely light up Castillo on the feet, but I'm taking Castillo by decision. Next up, last fight on the Fox Sports 1 prelim card at welterweight, Court McGee versus Ryan LaFleur. This was supposed to be Court McGee versus Kevin Gastelum, another fight I forgot to mention. Affected by injury, and Ryan LaFleur replaces Gastelum. I thought the original matchup was going to be a really great fight, but Ryan LaFleur coming in also off of short notice, fresh off of his victory over Santiago Ponzinibbio from the Belfort Henderson card. Kind of an interesting matchup. You have Court McGee, a tough veteran of almost 3 or 4 years, tough 11 he won. He had a bit of a layoff in there, and he's still kind of, his career hasn't really taken off yet in the UFC. He's still kind of, I get the feeling, at least how I see it, he's still kind of trying to, get his footing in the UFC and, really start to put in a good win streak here. But he had a good win over Robert Whittaker, who was, fresh off of tough smashes. And that was a competitive fight. He was able to pull away in the end, though, with better cardio. He's pretty much a relentless striker. He goes after it on the feet. We haven't seen this guy's wrestling in a long time, though. I remember his first fight after the tough finale when he fought, I believe it was Dave Jensen. He was getting dominated early in that fight and turned it on in the end. Used his wrestling, was able to win by arm triangle choke. And we haven't seen much of his wrestling. We didn't see it in the Josh Neer fight, and we didn't see it in his last fight against Whittaker. Ryan LaFleur, on the other hand, really flying under the radar, but this guy's he's got a solid wrestling game and a really solid top game. I have a feeling this could be a guy who is going to continue to fly under the radar, but I think he's definitely capable of upsetting McGee here if he uses his wrestling. He did have some trouble on the feet in his last fight, faded a bit against Ponzinibbio, but really a strong, big, strong kid. And, Court McGee, though, he's going to be a little more polished on the feet, I think. But McGee, I don't think has the knockout power to lay out LaFleur. In a wrestling match, I like LaFleur. I think he's got the credentials. It's going to be a real gritty, tough fight, though. I'm going to go with the upset. I'm going to go with LaFleur. I think his wrestling and top control is going to be too good, but McGee could definitely win. I didn't think McGee would win against Robert Whittaker, but he did, and he's a real tough guy, so close matchup. I'm taking LaFleur, though, in the upset. Next up, onto the main card, lightweight, Joe Lauzon versus Mac Danzig. I gotta go with Lauzon here. Lauzon's a really inconsistent guy. Gets dominated when he fights guys, higher up in the rankings, and especially guys who have any kind of striking game. Jim Miller really beat him up on the feet. Same thing in his last fight with Michael Johnson. Got badly outstruck in that fight. Mac Danzig does not have the striking of either of those two guys, though. So, Lauzon, I think he's going to be real motivated to get an impressive win here. And Danzig, a tough guy, decently skilled guy, but I think his most impressive win to me was that knockout of Joe Stevenson, which was like 3 years ago, and he hasn't impressed me since then. Most of his fights have been pretty uneventful decisions. Got knocked out in his last fight against Melvin Gillard, but I just think Lozon's going to be too aggressive. I think he's going to get him down quick, make it a brawl, and jump on a submission early. So I'm taking Lozon by submission. Next up at featherweight, Chad Money Mendes versus Nick the Carney Lentz. Don't understand this fight really. Mendes has been tearing through guys at featherweight, especially in his last fight, taking out a real experienced veteran like Guida, being able to finish him. And Nick Lentz, not a bad guy at all. He's definitely not a can, but the guys he's beaten, I don't think he really deserves to fight Mendes. But Nick Lentz, a real tough wrestler. Was on a bit of a win streak for a while, and had some slip ups at lightweight against Bocek and Evan Dunham, where he got out grappled. Since coming to featherweight, has had a bit of a rejuvenation. He finished one Japanese fighter. I think it was Issei Tamura. Or maybe it was one Asian fighter. I can't remember who. And then he beat Hakran Diaz. I believe that was his last fight, and pretty impressive there because Hakran Diaz out grappled Uriah Alcantara. But Nick Lentz in both Diego Nunez fight, which is another fight he won at featherweight, the Diego Nunez and the Hakran Diaz fight, he's very desperate for the takedown. That's what he works for. But this guy, when he's on his feet for any amount of time, he's getting lit up. It happened in both the Nunez and Diaz fight. They got pretty close to finishing him in those fights, or at least it looked like it. He was really getting beaten up on the feet, and he really needs that takedown. I don't think he can out-wrestle Mendes. He's tough, he's gritty, but I don't think he can take Mendes down, and I don't think he has a chance standing with Mendes. So I'm going to go with Mendes by knockout, either first or second round. Mendes has been really impressive on a real tear. The last fight with Guida was, that was definitely a step up in competition for him. You can argue that the rest of his wins in there weren't against top 10 guys or really good guys. He did fight Elkins, but also fought McKenzie and Yatsen Meza in there. Not great competition, but he looked pretty damn impressive finishing those guys. And I think Mendes is he's really deserving of another title shot here pretty soon. But I think he can knock out Nick Lentz. Next up, the co-main event, Uriah, the California Kid Faber versus Michael Mayday McDonald. My initial thought when this fight was announced was McDonald by knockout. I was super impressed with his last performance over Brad Pickett. Uriah Faber, though, I think is the win streak he's been on since his loss to Hayden Barao has been pretty impressive, finishing Ivan Menjivar, especially in his last fight, finishing Scott Jorgensen. A fight where he came out really strong, started to fade a bit, and was still able to get the finish. And then beating Uriah Alcantara, who had him in a dangerous spot. And that was a real dangerous fight for him to take, against a no-name, at least to the casual fans. And he took the fight and he dominated after that first minute or so. He was in a bad spot, but McDonald super young. I believe he's only 22, and just getting better with each fight. And even in the Barao fight, that's the best anyone's ever done against Barao in the UFC. And he knocked Barao down at one point, and His last fight, when he just teed off on Brad Pickett, unleashed just a nasty, ferocious, violent barrage. The hand speed and the power, I was really blown away by. He wasn't able to finish Pickett with that. Actually got taken down in the second round and then able to get the triangle choke. The guy's real dangerous and solid everywhere. But being taken down by Brad Pickett makes me think that Faber is going to be able to take him down almost at will. Faber, Pickett's not a bad wrestler, but Faber is a much better wrestler, obviously, than Pickett, and he pushes a really high pace. So, part of me thinks Faber will be able to get him down at will, grind out a decision. Faber's not bad on his feet, but does not have the speed or the power that McDonald does. Can't put the combinations together like McDonald. And the other part of me thinks McDonald's just going to go off on him on the feet at some point like he did to Pickett, just unleash a nasty barrage. I have to go with McDonald, though. I just think, the youth and the sheer power is going to come through. Faber could win it, though. Both these guys are right there, ready for the title shot. I'd like to see Faber be able to beat a surging young prospect like McDonald, but I'm going to pick McDonald. I do think he's going to be able to finish Faber. Faber's been knocked out before. And in the main event, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson against Joseph Benavidez in the rematch for the flyweight title. In the first fight, I actually scored that fight for Benavidez. Thought he won it. Close fight, though. Demetrius Johnson does a great job of getting stronger in the later rounds, especially where his opponents usually fade. He comes on stronger. Benavidez, obviously way more dangerous, I think, than Dodson with the striking. And also in that first fight, he caught Demetrius Johnson, knocked him down with a punch, and jumped on a guillotine from top position. And it looked like Johnson was really squirming to get out of that, and it looked like he had it. But Benavidez, the streak he's been on is incredible, and this will be his fourth fight in 9 months. Since their first meeting, he took on Uncle Creepy Ian McCall in February. He fought Darren Uenoyama in April. Took on Jussier Formiga in September, and now he's fighting for the title again. That's a lot of fights in only 9 months. 4 fights. The work he's put in that amount of time has been incredible, especially the last 2 finishes over his last 2 fights were really impressive finishes. I think he's got way more power than Johnson on the feet, and I want to pick him to win, but Johnson, he out-wrestles everyone, never gets tired, and he's just a real smart guy. He's a master, becoming a master of the game plan. His last fight against John Moraga, just took him down at will, pushed a high pace, and even got the finish at the end. And I think Johnson's going to have a little easier time with the takedowns here. But, Johnson, all of his fights, too, he's been dropped. Was dropped by Dodson, was dropped by Benavidez in their first fight, and also dropped by Moraga in the last fight. So Benavidez, I think, definitely has that chance throughout the fight. But also Benavidez, something to consider. The 2 guys he finished with striking, Uenoyama and Formiga, they kind of stood in front of him, and neither of those guys are really great strikers, maybe not even average. So, Demetrius Johnson, really good movement on the feet, elusive. Doesn't just stand in front of guys and throw down. Very smart with his fighting style. And I want to pick Benavidez to win. He's been tearing through guys, but I got to go with Johnson. Just the game plan, and I think he's just kind of better than he's the champion. I think he's the best guy at flyweight, and I think he just comes in with he's really dedicated to breaking down his opponent's games and putting together great game plans, and just really solid fundamentals, the wrestling, and the very not dangerous striking, but striking where he protects himself and doesn't leave himself open to being knocked out too often. So I'm gonna go with Johnson by decision. Definitely giving Benavidez a chance though to catch him on the feet. So those are my predictions for UFC on Fox 9, Johnson versus Benavidez 2. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. I'll be back with my recap for this. Also going to recap the TUF 18 finale and UFC 167, Pierre versus Hendricks. I still haven't recapped those last two cards, but if you want to check those out, please do so. I'll try to leave annotations, but thanks a lot for watching, guys. Please like the video, definitely comment with your thoughts, and please subscribe. But I'll see you guys later. Like I said, I'll be back with a recap, and I'll be back in a few weeks with my predictions for the big end of the year fight card, UFC 168. Silva, or Weidman versus Silva 2. But I'll see you guys later. Thank you. Take care.